I want to get into how you ended up getting trapped in the Venezuelan embassy, or how you decided to stay in there because you were there helping that. Were you there helping the embassy, or were you there covering what was going on in the U.S. embassy at the Venezuelan embassy in D.C.? But what exactly happened with that?
This is one of the well, there are so many wild stories to emerge out of this whole coup saga, from the Bay of Piglets mercenary invasion to this saga of the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. Essentially, what happened was after the U.S. recognition of Guaido in January 2019, several weeks went by where the coup regime was not catching any momentum. They got Western Europe and a few Latin American satellite states to recognize Guaido's legitimacy, but by and large, the world and most of all the Venezuelan people were rejecting the Washington's coup policy. And so they needed something to give the Guaido shadow puppet regime an air of authority. And so beginning in March of 2019, US officials began, and by then they'd already kicked Maduro's government and his representatives out of the United States, given them a deadline to leave. And so there were several office buildings belonging to the Venezuelan government, such as the military attache in Washington, D.C., the New York City consulate office as well, were pretty much empty. And so in March, the US, with Carlos Vecchio, who is the US Venezuelan ambassador to Washington representing Guaido's government, who's really just a function of ExxonMobil. I document that in my book. He's really just someone who worked for the private oil industry and pretty much, I think, still represents their interests. He took over these buildings with the help of US officials who just pretty much walked in one day because no one was there and took them over. And this was an extreme violation of international law and diplomatic law, the Vienna Diplomatic Conventions, which clearly state the basis of diplomacy is that embassies and diplomats are off limits. In fact, embassies are considered the sovereign territory of the state that is operating within it. So the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. is and was then the sovereign territory of Venezuela. And the Vienna Diplomatic Conventions clearly state that the host country does not have the right to send officers or any authority, state authority whatsoever, into that territory without the stated permission of the government operating and owning the embassy. And after they seized these initial government buildings, Venezuelan government buildings, Medea Benjamin of Code Pink came up with this idea to she herself just start sleeping over in the Venezuelan embassy at the invitation of Venezuela's UN recognized legitimate government, Maduro, and protect the space, because just by her being in there, it meant that US authorities, if they wanted to take the building, were going to have to not only go in there and violate the sovereign territory as they had before with these other buildings, but then also arrest a US citizen who was there with the permission of the government. So it raised the stakes for Washington substantially. And myself and other individuals, eventually hundreds of individuals, joined Medea at the embassy. It became kind of this place where people were they were working during the day. There would be concerts at night, seminars about Latin America or Africa all in the evening. Just it became a space that people were trying to use for education purposes, for cultural purposes, but ultimately just continue to keep a presence of the space so that U.S. authorities couldn't just walk in there one day and take over the embassy. And so I live in DC, so it was easy for me to just go during the day. I slept over once just for fun with Medea and, well, actually with Kevin Zeese and Margaret Flowers of Popular Resistance. But I mostly was just coming and going during the day to see what was going on. And then on the day that people may remember, there was this failed military uprising in April 2019 when Guaido tried to band together this group of about 20 soldiers to storm and take the Venezuelan government by force. It failed completely. On that date, the Venezuelan opposition in the United States, led by Carlos Vecchio, this ExxonMobil functionary who was representing Guaido in Washington, all descended upon the embassy, and actually they were actually acting as shock troops pretty much to intimidate these peaceful anti-war US activists into leaving the territory, into leaving the embassy, so that US authorities could come take it. And they were very violent. It's all on video. They sexually assaulted people, like grabbed their women in the chest. They violently threw one elderly man to the ground. I mean, there's all this video online that I linked to in my book, and that is also other journalists have covered just how vile that pro-coup mob was. And eventually what they did was, and we had no idea that this was something that was possible. One day when I was there inside the embassy, just as I had been many other days, interviewing people, seeing what's going on in this back and forth with the pro-coup mob that had taken over outside. One evening, they began pitching tents and bringing in like lawn chairs and put them all around the building. This is, again, a sovereign embassy in Washington, D.C. And they started sleeping over and occupying every entrance point so that people basically couldn't come or go. They would assault anyone who tried to enter the door and physically block them from coming. And then we realized that those of us who were inside were the only ones left, and no one could come or go. So we were either going to have to leave, and then, or if we decided to leave, it would let the coup mob in, and that they basically unleashed this siege to starve us out, thinking that, and they would chant, no food, no water. They were trying to make sure that we couldn't get food inside the building. And so when that happened on that day, I just decided to stay. It became this very intense standoff. There was no way I was going to leave. And I recorded everything that happened inside. And ultimately, this went on for, I was in there for 10 days. They cut the water off to the building. That was done by the local DC utility company at the behest of the State Department. They cut off the electricity as well, actually. They cut the electricity off first, thinking that that would get people to leave. And when nothing worked, then they just handed down an arrest threat and said, even though we knew it wasn't legitimate because this coup government wasn't legitimate, they said, look, these coup representatives that the U.S. recognizes as the sovereign government of Venezuela has ordered everyone out, and anyone who stays is going to be arrested by U.S. authorities. At that point, I didn't want to risk arrest. I left. 4 people did stay: Kevin Zeese, Margaret Flowers, David Paul, and Adrian Pine, knowing they were going to get arrested because they wanted to challenge this in court. And 2 days after I left, a team of U.S. agents wearing night vision goggles and flak vests, and I say in the book that they looked more like they were prepared for a raid on the Bin Laden compound than to take 4 peace activists out of a local DC embassy. And they marched them out and arrested those four individuals. So that's the story of kind of how I got stuck in the embassy. But there's so that chapter in its own could have been a separate book.
Wow, incredible. So what is going on with that embassy today? Has it been shut down completely?
It's empty. I walk by very often just to see what's going on. It's in Georgetown, a beautiful, very wealthy neighborhood in Washington, D.C., right on the canal, historic Georgetown Canal. And last I saw, the windows were actually boarded up with cardboard, because the reality is, and this is the point that we made the entire time that we were inside the embassy, even if Carlos Vecchio, the Exxon functionary, took over the building, he didn't answer to an actual foreign ministry in Caracas. So the
Right.
great tragedy is that they can't, even to this day, Venezuelans in the United States who need to get consular services have to go to Mexico or Canada or somewhere else just to update their passports or get basic help that our government is preventing them from receiving from their embassy in the United States. Carlos Vecchio can't do it,
Yeah.
and so that's why it's empty to this day.
Yeah. So the U.S. government is still unwilling to recognize the government of Venezuela, the actual functioning government of Venezuela. and is basically just acting like a petulant child at this point. Like, well, then no embassy for you. I mean, it's just, which is ridiculous. You're right, because embassies operate to help the citizens of of that nation in the foreign country that they're in, and now Venezuelans, which the U.S. has encouraged essentially Venezuelans to migrate. And I believe millions have
Yep.
left Venezuela because of the debilitating economic sanctions that the U.S. put on this country, knowing it would rile it into poverty, and of course people would flee. So we've got all these Venezuelans here, and yet they don't have an embassy because we're like, oh, we just don't want to recognize the government that's there. Just continuing to try to oust it. That's
Exactly.
crazy. Now, many of you know I talk about Field of Greens a lot, and that is a really great powder made of organic fruits and vegetables that you mix into your ice water and you drink it. And it's going to give you all of your servings of fruits and vegetables every day that you need in order to keep up with, the healthy diet thing that we're all supposed to be doing. Well, Field of Greens is made by a company called Brick House, and they have another really great product out there called Lean that I've just started taking, and it is a weight loss pill, but don't be scared of this. I normally stay away from this kind of stuff. I don't like that kind of thing. I'm an all natural type of person. And what's great about Field of Greens, or sorry, about Brick House, which makes Field of Greens, and their new product Lean, is that is all natural, and it is a great way to help boost your metabolism, burn the fat, curb cravings, and get you to that pre-pandemic body. I know that's what I'm trying to do. I got to drop some pounds. So I'm starting to take Lean in order to get back to my pre-pandemic bod. And what's great about Lean is, like I said, it's all natural, but it is going to help lower your blood sugar. It's going to help metabolize your body fat, and it's going to curb your cravings. And that's really the trifecta of how to lose weight. And that is scientifically backed, scientifically proven. So start the journey with me. They say it takes 3 weeks for it to really start kicking in. I started taking it a week ago, and I can tell you my cravings have already been curbed and my appetite is definitely lessened. So my husband's like eating cookies at night, and I'm not like gobbling them up with him. I've been able to refrain and not even really think about it. And I do think it's because of this really great product that I've been taking. So visit fieldofgreens.com, use promo code Kim, and that will get you 15% off of your order. So again, promo code Kim at fieldofgreens.com, and you will get 15% off your order of Field of Greens or Lean, or just browse around and see whatever products they've got. You'll get 15% off that order.